Okay, cool. Thanks for joining me again. Today I'm going to be talking about how to integrate Amazon APIs into your Unity project. And my name is Peter Heinrich. I'm a developer evangelist for Amazon, which is, if you were in my last talk, I kind of touched on the fact that it's kind of a weird title. It means that I'm part technical, part marketing. You should see the look they give me at Border Control when I mention what I do for a living. And I don't think they get a lot of developer evangelists passing through customs. But my job basically boils down to trying to make other developers be successful on Amazon. And that includes on our hardware and on our software. So a lot of the developers don't know anything about the software libraries that we make available through the Amazon Appstore, though we spend a lot of effort there trying to make them more successful and speed their time to market, simplify their development. Now this session isn't designed to be a crash course in every App Store library that we make available. Instead, I'm going to try to show you some of the APIs that we offer and how they can be used alongside Unity, which is definitely one of the most popular, if not the most popular, third-party development platform for mobile app and game creation on our devices. And technically, I think this session is described as a workshop, but mostly I think that just boils down to the fact that we're going to see some real code. We're not going to step through actual development here. You don't have to bring a device to work on. But in the end, I think you'll find that maybe in keeping with the general ease of use and accessibility of Unity in general, the technical details of getting things to actually work are really pretty manageable. So laying out our agenda for today, I'll briefly describe some of the APIs we make available through the Amazon App Store, then talk even more briefly about what it takes to get access to those APIs, and walk through a couple of the services in particular that you may want to incorporate into your Unity app. So let's dive in. The Amazon App Store has a number of ways in which we try to improve your app's customer experience, monetization, user retention, revenue-generating opportunities. And our guiding principle is pretty straightforward. Amazon's founder, Jeff Bezos, actually laid it out pretty simply in 7 simple words. And they apply to all areas of our business: retail, web services, digital, content on demand. This principle applies basically regardless of how we define customer in each of these areas. So for App Store, our customers include the users, obviously, for whom we are the means to obtain the content they want, their Android content. But they also include the developers on the other side of that equation, right? The ones that are trying to get their works into the hands of the public. So that means that App Store has 2 very different constituencies, and each of them requires us to work backwards in a slightly different way. So there's this unified vision across both, however, which is we want to delight the customers by connecting them with the content and the experience that they want or that we think they might want. And this obviously serves the content creators as well as the consumers. From the consumer's perspective, the most direct manifestation of this is the Amazon App Store itself, which comes pre-installed on all the Amazon devices and can also be side-loaded on any Android device. It's an app marketplace that also offers features and benefits that are unique to Amazon, like Amazon Coins, which is a virtual currency, and totally transparent to developers, and also Amazon Underground, which is a program that allows customers to install and use premium and freemium apps at literally no cost forever. And on the developer side, there are a bunch of services that we provide to simplify and lighten the burden of development, making it easy to add functionality and features that you would otherwise have to code yourself. So this is in addition to programs like Amazon Coins, which I just mentioned, that are totally transparent. That is, you don't have to do anything, right? As a developer, there are no changes required to your code. You still benefit from the enhanced customer engagement. Amazon Underground, another example that serves the developer as well, providing an alternative monetization model that can be superior to freemium or premium in the right circumstances. And for several of these APIs, we actually provide direct Unity support in the form of downloadable plugins. So using them is as simple as including any other third-party library in your Unity app. And we have Unity plugins for in-app purchasing or IAP, mobile ads, Game Circle, which includes achievements, leaderboards, and game data syncing through WhisperSync, and Amazon Fling for enhanced multi-screen experiences. So to download these Unity plugins, and before you can actually use the services from within your mobile app or game, you need to register on Amazon as an Amazon developer. And this is completely free. And if you're already an Amazon customer, you're actually halfway there, because mostly we just need your name, address, and email. And to kick things off, you'd go to developer.amazon.com, which is what we call our developer portal. And it's the one-stop clearinghouse for everything you need to know to develop on Amazon devices or use our services. So you'll find links here to documentation and sample code, payment and analytics dashboards, app publishing tools, videos, all the resources that might help you, like marketing and promotion guides to help you make your mobile app or game successful with us. And then once there, you can sign up with your existing Amazon account or create a new one to link to your development, if on the off chance you've never used Amazon as a customer. And if this is a new account, then we'll ask you for some basic profile information like your name, address, and email, and then afterwards we'll ask you to agree to our app distribution and services agreement. Pretty standard, fair. I mean, none of these forms are going to be a surprise to you. The legalese will all look totally familiar if you've launched anything on iTunes or Google Play, and all the terms are very similar, so there are no real surprises. And then next, we'll collect some info from you about future payments, namely, will you collect any, and if so, how should we pay them to you? Again, nothing too difficult or surprising here. The trickiest part might just be looking up all your bank info so we know where to send you the generated revenue. And then the reason I go through this process and highlight it is because if you will be generating revenue, one of the stickiest parts for new developers on our site is actually completing this tax identity survey. And really all it does is it allows us to collect some information on behalf of the government, because they need us to submit forms explaining how we're going to pay you. So it usually just adds 1 or 2 minutes to the whole process, but it's a necessary step for us to recognize you as a payable entity for our store. And that's it as far as account signup goes. So now you have full access to our entire developer portal, including all the documentation and downloads, and we have a bunch of SDK files and code samples there. So you can use this handy-dandy bit.ly link, Appstore SDK, it's at the very top, to access them directly. And then once you reach this page, scroll down and you'll find links to the files that we're going to be talking about. You notice that there are iOS resources as well as the ones you would obviously expect to find for Android and Fire OS. And that's because some of our services like Amazon Mobile Ads, Login with Amazon, Amazon Cloud Drive can actually be used with iOS apps too, so they're totally cross-platform and they're not limited to Android devices. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of these services and what it takes to use them with a Unity project. We'll start with Amazon Mobile Ads, simply because they support a very popular common monetization model that just about everybody uses at some point, support all sorts of different categories and genres of mobile apps. And the basics are the Amazon Mobile Ads API is, as you'd expect, it's an in-app display advertising solution. It allows you to monetize mobile apps and games across platforms, as I mentioned, because it's cross-platform. And that includes phones and tablets on Android, iOS, and Fire OS. So it offers really good revenue potential because we actually pay on impressions rather than clicks. And the ads themselves are highly relevant and mobile optimized, either for Amazon itself or from high-quality brands that we've taken the time to vet. So the program is available in several geographic regions, including the US, UK, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and Japan. Although you as a developer can obviously be located anywhere. It's just those are the regions where the ads are actually served. So as long as you have customers in those areas, the Amazon Mobile Ad Network is a great option. And the Mobile Ads API supports a few basic ad types, starting with static banners, which are basically HTML web views that typically open an in-app browser or a native browser or an Android intent. Rich media expandable banners, which are HTML web views that expand in-app with rich interactive content. Static interstitials, which are full-page ads, usually appear at a transition point in the app, like a game transition or moving from level to level. modeless interstitials, full screen ad that can be embedded inside a container view, provided it's large enough. And you can think of a typical example might be a carousel of images with ads interleaved in between them. And then rich media interstitials, which combine a bunch of these features together at once, allowing for rich interactivity, and typically what you would see it used for is click-to-play videos. So now that we know a little bit more about the mobile ads API, how do we actually go about incorporating it into our Unity app? And the first step is simply to add the correct plugin to your Unity project. And in your Unity development environment, simply open the project tab, right-click on the assets folder to bring up the context menu, and then we're going to import the package and choose custom package. In the file system dialog that appears, we just navigate to the folder where we downloaded the SDK and extracted it. And then we're going to be looking for the .unity package extension. So select in this case, the Amazon Mobile Ads .unity package file, click open. And then once you do, Unity has this feature where it will highlight all the files that it's about to open and show you which ones conflict with files already in your project. So if you find some conflicts, you'll need to actually save your local changes, perform the import, and then merge back those changes manually. So my experience has been that this hasn't happened very often. I haven't had to merge too frequently, but you should be aware that it might happen in some cases. And then once that's complete, you'll see your project folder is going to look something like this. You'll see the Amazon Mobile Ads plugin listed there, alongside an Android folder and an iOS folder, which these folders actually contain the native code that integrate with the SDK. Now, with some services, and Amazon Mobile Ads falls into this category, there's going to be an application key that the service uses to enable access and tie usage back to your specific app. It basically ties your app to the remote service. So when you publish apps on the Amazon Appstore, just as on other app stores, they'll appear on this management console that we make available to you, allowing you to add product listing assets like screenshots and videos and change the description, that kind of thing. But you'll also be able to review the application keys that are associated with your app for each of the services that it may use. So for instance, to see the key that enables the mobile ad service in your app, you'll go to the app management page and click the little mobile ads link. And then your app won't automatically have access to the mobile ad network. So the first time you click through this link, you'll basically be saying, yes, I want to use mobile ads in my app, please turn on access. And then you just click the submit to save the setting. And then after this, the service knows that it can serve ads in your app, and it will generate a unique ID for you to use to identify it as a valid ad client. So in my example here, the mobile ads network has created this unique identifier that associates my Android app as a valid client, and it expects me to supply this value whenever I make calls to the service from within my app. And you note that there will be a separate, different ID generated for the iOS version of my app if I have one. And I set that up here as well. So the service then is able to differentiate between the same app running on different platforms. And here we get to see our first real code. It's a workshop. Okay, awesome. This is a Unity script to initialize our connection to the Amazon Mobile Ad Network using the SDK that we imported from the plugin. So where you put this code is completely up to you, whether you have a dedicated game object or you roll this into some initialization module, it doesn't really matter. But wherever it ends up, note that I created a public string containing the mobile ad application key that was generated for me. And actually, I created two, one for Android, one for iOS. And then down below, you see how I'm using a set of preprocessor directives to choose the correct string based on the platform where my app is actually running. And then once I have the key, I can pass it to the SDK object I created that holds the API entry points for the service. And since we're good programmers and we have a healthy paranoia when it comes to testing, we're going to enable testing and logging for our calls to the mobile ads API. And this boils down to retrieving the interface object again, the Amazon Mobile Ads implementation instance, and then setting the current state of its testing and logging members. And this is especially important, as I mentioned before, if you are yourself are located outside of any of the supported countries, which again are US, UK, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and Japan. Since if you call this API and you're not in one of those countries and you haven't turned on testing, then you'll never actually see any ads. So on Android, before we can actually create a test ad, we'll need to make sure that our Android manifest includes a few key features. Number one, we need to make sure that it requests the right permissions to enable access to the service, namely internet, access network state, and access Wi-Fi state. And two, we need to add the com.amazon.device.ads ad activity to the application block. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to dive too deep into the detail corresponding to the steps on iOS, but you can find all the information you need on our developer portal. So now that we've turned on debugging and logging and made sure our app has the correct permissions via the manifest file, and explicitly declared the mobile ads activity, we can try creating and displaying a test ad. And again, it's up to you where you want to put this code and how it gets called, since it's just a test. Maybe attach it to a UI element. Regardless, the goal of this method is essentially to create and display a floating ad that's docked at the center top of the screen. So in this case, we'll use a helper class provided by the SDK called placement. And it just allows us to specify parameters related to the ad size and positioning. And next, we'll call the mobile ad service to create an ad object having the correct placement. And finally, we'll just tell the service that we actually want it to return us something from its ad inventory and then display it. And remember, if you're not in a supported geography and haven't enabled testing, this call won't actually do anything. But since we are in a supported geography, at least for this demonstration, and we did turn on testing, it does work, and this is what we get. A simple banner ad, it's docked and centered at the top of the screen, and in this case, it's in landscape mode. The SDK will actually take care of automatically rotating the ad based on the orientation of your device. So you can see it's pretty straightforward to create an ad object and set some parameters on how it should be displayed, and then initiate a call to retrieve content and throw it up on the screen. And for test purposes, you can also see it's easy to put the SDK in testing mode, so it lets you retrieve all kinds of ads even if you're not physically located in a region where they're actually supported. And the mobile ads SDK actually exposes quite a bit more functionality and configuration, which is all supported by the Unity plugin directly. So you can also register callbacks, for example. You can have your game objects be notified when ad content actually loads. So you can, for example, pause game music, for instance, while an ad is displayed, or take some other action. Or maybe you want to handle ad errors in a particular way, so that if an ad doesn't load, you use a mitigation service, for instance, to rotate to a different ad provider and try to get some content from them. Or you can achieve this type of control through callbacks, which you define as simple functions in your C# script somewhere, as I've done here, and then you register them with the mobile ads wrapper that you instantiated at startup. And that's the pattern that you apply pretty much any time you want to incorporate an Amazon API into your Unity app. It boils down to 4 basic steps, not all of which are necessary every time. But first, you need to obtain a handle to the implementation object, which is going to be defined in the SDK, and it acts as the interface to the service. Next, you're going to prepare any parameters that you may need to pass to the API. So this is for the API to operate on, or that will modify its behavior. And some APIs obviously will take no parameters, in which case this step is not necessary. And then third, in cases where a result isn't going to be returned immediately, then define a callback so that you can process it when it does become available. And then finally, going ahead and calling the API member method on the implementation object, passing the parameters that you initialize. And this is the basic outline for calling any Amazon API if there's a Unity plugin for the corresponding service. So that's mobile ads. It's a remote service. It runs on our servers in the cloud. It can return content to your app in response to a request. So let's take a look at another example, one that isn't technically remote. It's actually effectively local. So this is the Amazon Fling Sdk, which is a cross-platform toolkit that enables developers to build rich, this is straight from their website, build rich multi-screen experiences with Amazon Fire TV. So it allows you to send video or audio or images over a local network to Fire TV devices, Fire TV or Fire TV Stick. And it doesn't obviously depend on any cloud service. So we don't have a service running somewhere that does all the work. The SDK allows you to fling this content to the devices with code that's actually right on inside your app. And even though the logistics under the covers are radically different than for mobile ads, calling the APIs follows the same simple pattern. So again, the basics first, Fling, it's just a toolkit. It works on iOS, Android, and Fire OS. It allows you to build these multi-screen experiences and send media back and forth between your mobile app, regardless of the platform, and Fire TV. And it also allows those devices to communicate in both directions, so it's possible to create these engaging second screen experiences. Working with the Fling SDK from Unity is substantially the same as we saw for mobile ads, although in this case there's no application key that you need to keep track of and pass because there's no remote service that's going to be validating your calls. So in that regard, it's actually easier to use. Just as before, though, somewhere you're going to have some initialization that takes place, and the SDK will give you back an implementation object that you can use to execute API calls. Now it happens that Fling is actually heavily asynchronous, so especially compared to mobile ads. So that's not a problem for us because we've already seen how to write callback functions. They're super simple, straightforward, just like mobile ads. You just need to send the names of the functions that you define to the specific event handler set methods on the implementation object. And you need to make sure that those methods are actually accessible. So the Fling SDK actually requires us to flesh out a few handlers, which are essentially just methods that it uses to asynchronously tell us about these potential target devices, where we can send media or control the volume or pause or play, etc. And we can tell the SDK to start looking for targets, and then it will alert us through this callback that we defined whenever it actually discovers one. We can then take that opportunity to update a list, for instance, of potential targets for the user. Similarly, if a device gets turned off or moves out of range, we can be notified that it's no longer a valid target. And the Unity plugin that we make available actually supports both sides of the Fling SDK. So that is, there's a component that will accept flinged content, the target app, essentially. And then there's also the aspect of controller. You can write a controller app that does the flinging and initiates playback or chooses content, etc. And then like mobile ads, there are a few modifications you have to make to your Android manifest file here on the right, just to enable the Fling functionality. And again, basically this comes down to adding the appropriate permissions for the network. And if you're deploying on Fire OS, where a lot of this functionality is built into the operating system, there's actually no need to include the whisperplay jar file, which is why in the second point there I say go ahead and remove that if you're deploying on Fire OS. You just need to make sure that you include the uses library line at the bottom so that your app actually links to the OS library. And again, there's a lot more involved on the iOS side. I'm not going to dive down too deep into it. There's a bit.ly link at the bottom, however, that goes into an in-depth discussion of all the details associated with deploying Fling-enabled apps on iOS, Android, and Fire OS. So, what do we take away from this? Well, I hope above all that I've made it clear just how little effort is actually involved in integrating Amazon APIs in your Unity apps. The basic pattern isn't complicated, but it opens up several useful and cross-platform services to be included in your apps with very little work. So all you need to do is register as an as an Amazon developer for free. Take a look at the features and functionality of the services we make available, and then use the Unity plugins on our developer portal to connect your app to the service you need and publish it on our store. It's pretty straightforward. And that's it. Thank you so much. Short and sweet. Appreciate you coming.